good to go? All right, that means go. Hi, everyone. I'm Adam Nordin. I'm a managing director at Goldman Sachs. Thanks, everybody, for coming here today. If anybody needs, there's plenty of room up front. Today, we're going to talk about consolidation in K-12. We've got Jason Brein, Jamie Candee, Joy Chen, and Christine Willig. I'm used to kind of usually being in a room where I feel like I've done the most deals. Sitting on this panel, I know that's not true. So you have four perspectives from people who are well accomplished in M&A, consolidation, integration, and thinking about how to holistically productize bringing different companies together. So why don't we dive right into it? We're going to start at a high level and talk about consolidation and really where are the opportunities in both technology and services in K-12. What do you think are the largest opportunities today? Where do you see the biggest opportunities in the future? And when you think about, has there been change over time in how you've appreciated where those opportunities are or how you've executed against those? Christine, why don't I just start right here with you?
Great, and it was a multi-part question. Oh, God. Okay.
We can remember that.
So I have been kind of thinking about this a little bit, and so I'm going to start with a bit of a metaphor. Recently I've had a really close friend who's been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer, breast cancer. And over the last year, she's been going through radiation, chemo, surgery, all those things. So she's got a whole bunch of doctors, oncologists and surgeons and repair people. And then she's got a whole bunch of supporting people. And I go to bed at night, think about my friend, and think, golly, I hope all of those people are communicating with each other. So is the oncologist really talking to the radiologist and really conferring with the oncology nurse, et cetera, et cetera? Why am I saying this? I feel the same way about K-12. I think the changes that are happening for the better and the opportunity in K-12 is where diagnosis can get more precise, and then remediation and fixing the problem can be more targeted and more efficient. So I'm assuming that medical team is supporting my friend in an efficient way, and I think consolidation for us as an industry is about helping in the support of that diagnosis and remediation in a more integrated and cohesive way.
And is it different today than how you might have thought about the sector 5 years ago and 10 years ago? Because it seems like the consolidation is accelerating. And so in years past, a decade ago, we would have looked and said it's the biggest opportunity, but it takes the greatest patience to wait for. And when you look at today, the velocity of M&A activity and the velocity of technology companies achieving scale in K-12 is quite different. So what might be changing about the constituents or the decision makers or different influencers that exist that are the fabric of these holistic solutions? Jamie, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I would. So I think that's a really good metaphor. And the way that we think about it is we've talked for decades about the third grade literacy gate and why can't we get kids at a larger scale to be able to read effectively by third grade. And we keep talking about all the academic issues that we have, the learning challenges, and what we haven't been talking about, and now there's a lot of organizations working on this, is how do we really support the whole child? And that's a combination of how do you diagnose. But for us, specifically at Edmentum, it is how do we think about instruction and learning differently? And if a kid hasn't eaten the night before, the child shows up and his or her parents are going through a messy divorce, how do we expect that child to sit down and learn fractions or phonemic awareness? It's not going to happen. So we think about all of the amazing work that's going on around social emotional well-being, around assessments that really identify neuroscience around like how do you learn, how do you feel safe, how do teachers support you as an entire student, and that is going to better inform and affect academic learning over time.
And when you think about those kinds of solutions, do you feel like there's an audience that is more receptive today or has an innate desire to embrace those solutions?
Yes.
Or are you still pushing the technology curve against the behavioral resistance curve?
There's a little bit of push. You'll always have that in education. I think the research supports what we're talking about now. And so for our educators and administrators that we serve, when you've got enough research to support that academic learning is growth will improve if we're able to invest and focus during the instructional day, right? So not something that is a supplement or incremental to what teachers already have to do throughout the day, but woven into core instruction. If a teacher, intuitively teachers know that a student is struggling from a social emotional perspective, they just don't know how to fix it. Mm-hmm. So as the research has emerged, and a lot of great organizations have been doing this work, like the Castle Framework and others, we're now at a place where there's a level of acceptance and now adoption, and there's funding sources directly associated with it.
And is that a function of, the problems are the same, but are the constituents different? The students are the same, obviously, and so we've been, trying to tackle these problems for years. But is there a difference in the nature of the decision makers themselves? The teachers are, it would seem to me that people would naturally be more technology centric as you're bringing younger people in, into the teaching positions, they're moving into administrative positions. How much is that changing? If what we've historically tried to tackle is, introducing technology into an environment that wants progress without change, yep. Are we finally shifting to change for progress?
So, again, I think it depends. You've got vast discrepancies between states and parts of education. But what I would say is we certainly have a generation of teachers who are far more comfortable using technology. This is not a hard thing for them. What hasn't changed, though, and this is where the push is that I think still exists, is when you look at pre-service programs and how we train teachers to teach, mm-hmm. we are still focused on a very traditional model. So teachers come out of their pre-service programs, they're very comfortable with technology, but what we haven't evolved, and this is the push part, is how do you change your instructional strategies? And if you look at those education organizations that are growing and very successful, we've all come to a place where we understand that wrapping around professional learning, instructional services, and support for those teachers, in terms of really getting them to understand, how do you implement this with fidelity in your classroom, that has been, and we're still going through a really big evolution there.
Joy, maybe you can comment on just how you think about it from an international perspective and a global perspective.
Sure.
Just given the dynamic degree of activity and growth that you've seen for TAL, not only in your home country market, but as you start to move throughout the world.
Actually, I myself moved to the United States 3.5 years ago. Used to be an entrepreneur in China and kind of worked on the ground for quite some years, and then got the company sold to TAL. So kind of know both markets. Actually here, more things for me to learn as well, but I get familiar with a China market in a much better way. When we are doing the international merger acquisition or investment, mostly we look into the universal kind of education needs. For example, two big things we're looking into. One is the STEM thing. Both governments from US and from China, we have promoted STEAM and STEM in both countries. Actually in China, year 2017, the government has already put this policy there. STEAM, STEM education has already been part of the compulsory public school curriculum, and which is a big thing. So that's kind of lead us to acquire CodeMonkey. I'm not so sure how many of you guys know about this merger acquisition we have done last year, December timeframe. CodeMonkey is a company come from Israel. They do very well with the STEAM curriculum on their online platform. And also last year, another acquisition which was shared with you guys, another big area we're interested in is the language learning, especially for English. Because of the globalization and also because China has the largest number of international students. I think last year was about 500,000. So in order to meet their needs to learn language, especially to learn English, we're looking for great products and services from English-speaking countries, especially in the United States. Last year, we did another acquisition, which is called Ready For. It's not specifically language learning or whatever, but it's kind of test prep for students, and those kind of tests are in SAT, SSAT, those type of things. So through these two merger acquisitions we've done very recently, kind of show you guys where are our interests and where we see big growth will be coming. And also another thing is back in China, there's another, I kind of see this probably here as well, another possibility, opportunity for consolidation to happen will be in the secondary kind of cities. We have big market leaders taking large share of the market in top tier city like Beijing and Shanghai. Probably this is kind of similar here. But in the secondary cities, we have kind of smaller business owners running their tutoring and education companies. We clearly see there will be more consolidation over there. I think here probably the same thing. If someone can provide a robust kind of platform or system, and having some of the smaller sized tutoring company organization getting together by supporting them with a strong operation, human resource, and capital, I do see that kind of consolidation will be happening as well.
I mean, it's an interesting concept you're introducing, because I think a lot of times people think about consolidation on a product development roadmap. And what you're describing is thinking about the environment as more of an ecosystem with multiple constituents who have distinct but related objectives. So when you think about the opportunities to utilize consolidation, and Jason, you may comment on this because the number of different investments that I'm familiar with that you've done, how do you think about, on a product development path, build versus buy, and how do you think about it in terms of addressing different constituents so that you have the opportunity to become more of a holistic platform that is the strategic partner to the reference market as opposed to a vendor within the market?
Yeah. So it's a multifaceted question. I'd say I'd sort of look at that from a few different angles. One, which is what the three of you have touched on, is the behavioral element. This market used to move at a glacial pace, because not only did you need to motivate people to change, but they needed to convince someone else to motivate someone else to change.
It's okay to laugh at ourselves.
And then they had to deploy a server in every school, in every closet, and then they had to sell maintenance, and they had to get that implemented. And then it would break, and then they go fix it, and then people would forget how to use it, and then everyone would just throw up their hands, and people would forget why they wanted to do this in the first place. And that was generally this market for a while. I think there has been incremental changes in behavior. Jamie, that's what you mentioned. Incremental changes in desire to make global investments, so TAM expansion, but a step function change in technology delivery. And I believe that has actually been a critical driver, probably not the most important driver, but the most important impetus for driving consolidation. Suddenly you have public cloud, Amazon Web Services, Azure, the Google Suite. You get started overnight. It's easy to use. There's no technical implementation. There is a user implementation and a behavioral change element to it. And suddenly the flywheel gets going. And suddenly you see success. And suddenly you have buy-in. And then suddenly that informs your product roadmap. And then suddenly you have a much more democratized system where the best products that get traction the quickest have a voice and a forum. And so all of that impacts product roadmaps. And all of that impacts build versus buy decisions. And now suddenly buying all of a sudden makes much more sense, because the thing you want to buy may have very well been developed elsewhere because it could be.
Jamie, let me ask you a question. As we think about technology, I think Jason's identified, so cloud and software are important catalysts for the opportunities in consolidation. How do you think about data analytics and the role that it plays, and in particular assessment, curriculum, the relationship between the two, and ultimately how that's linked to the instructional path? Is data analytics an expansion opportunity, or is it something that actually brings together different solutions to create more impact, which drives more growth?
Was that me? Did you say Jamie?
I did.
Yeah. So thank you. I think it's the latter of your two examples. So it's also table stakes, right? So what you're seeing is a level of comfort now with everybody's got digital tools in their classroom. Everybody's using some form of formative assessment. And what people are asking for is, how do I make sense of all this data? Like, all of you operators, companies, come to us as educators, as administrators, and help us make sense of all of this data. So I see it as both an expansion, but I also see it as a market expectation as we move forward. Districts don't know, and I'm speaking from a K-12 perspective, Districts have a really hard time articulating what they want to do with the data. Like they know they want to see longitudinal data about a student over time, right? And they know that they want these products to be more interoperable and work together. The next piece of that, which is the real expansion, is how do you get them to actually influence their instructional strategies, like how they run their schools from that data? We see that as a significant expansion opportunity, but the way that we look at it in Edmentum is everything we do is an integration of adaptive assessment and instruction. And you can't really personalize learning for kids unless you're constantly measuring where that student is at. That's a ton of data. So how do you make sense of all that data? And as a teacher on a daily basis with 30, 35 kids sitting in your classroom with all this data coming at you, like how do you decipher that? And that's something I think you guys are doing really, really well.
And yeah, that's actually the core value proposition of Illuminate Education. We are at the center of so much data analytics and visualization. And the visualization part is critical because teachers look at a wall of numbers and it's frightening, all right? And so the ability to understand both Susie, the individual, your class, and as a principal, your school, I do think data and analytics is one of those elements that's bringing about the consolidation, back to our big theme here, because Mr. Jones can't make it in his garage in the same way that certain curricular products were conceptualized in because he was a really good teacher. The kind of back end of all this data is quite an extraordinary feat, and it starts to pull together lots of pieces and parts. And then you layer on the constituencies that the products have to serve, sort of back to your first question.
Yes.
I think schools and districts are getting smarter and smarter about how they're evaluating products because it's a very much an ecosystem in that the buyer is not the end user. And I was just in a school a couple weeks ago where students were the agents of their own data. And it was very powerful to see because they suddenly understood the standard they understood and the one they did not, and where they had to address their work. That's the beginning of true personalized learning. So some of these solutions are only viable because of the cloud, because of ed tech, and some of these solutions are beginning to catch hold in school districts as what the promise of ed tech is for their lives as educators.
So as you think about consolidation, I mean, it's in the way you're describing it, in this, I mean, this across the entire group, you have a series of catalysts. So is consolidation really the cause, or is consolidation the result? Because it is now enabled by these different dynamics. You have software, you have cloud, you have data analytics. You essentially have more powerful solutions. Powerful solutions create more growth opportunities, which can be marketed to a set of constituents who are more receptive, in addition to being impassioned, to improve. So let me change topics a second because I think it's related, but one of the things we haven't talked about is distribution. And I think it's the relationship between a powerful solution and a problem, and the innate value proposition it represents is intuitive. But distribution is where historically many companies that are highly innovative have hit a wall. And so they bootstrap, they start, they grow, they hit the wall of distribution. How do you think about that, and how have you managed it? And has consolidation helped in terms of creating a common channel for the distribution of more comprehensive solutions? Or are there still distributed decision makers across the organizations that introduce complexity to distribution itself? Anybody who feels interested in that question?
I may have a different perspective because I'm coming from a market. We are selling to different types of customers. Here, probably most of you guys are selling to school districts. But for us, back in China market, to C is the largest kind of market we're targeting. So we're talking about students and their parents. Actually, those will be the people pull out the credit cards and pay for the tutoring services and the products. So I may have different perspective. For us, we kind of partnership with different social medias and also some big marketing kind of like agency type of role companies, and also like through our own like referral kind of base. I know here maybe you guys can share with me, because I'm learning as well, to know how can we develop our distribution channel, because I think eventually sooner or later we probably will introduce some of our products, the good ones from China here.
So I think it's really, really hard.
Oh, good to know.
I think distribution is the scarcest resource in this market, almost like uniquely and weirdly scarce. You know, I think in most markets with either an institutional or a consumer sale, you look at LTV to CAC or customer acquisition or some sales and marketing efficiency metric. In this market, it really is fairly bifurcated. Either you're wildly efficient because you've reached a certain level of scale, or you're almost unsustainably inefficient. And there is a little bit in between, but less than you might guess. So it does look more like a barbell. So our approach at Francisco Partners with respect to the K-12 segment, and it's a different approach than the higher education segment or the corporate training segment or really any other part of technology, is to start with buying distribution. Buy distribution, buy a company with good products, great distribution, and then everything else is figure-outable to some degree. But distribution is really, really hard to create from scratch without, you know, the benefit of a substantial amount of time and a substantial amount of investment capital.
The selling cycle is really long, and it still is. And the selling cycle is long, I think, in part because school districts have felt a little burned by ed tech products that they bought that had big promise and low delivery on that promise. And so now they involve even more of their constituencies in that. And the reason why distribution continues to be difficult in K-12 is that it depends very much on relationship.
That's right.
And without, I feel like I'm doing this weird thing with the mic. I apologize to everybody. But this idea of it being a completely rational choice, if any of you have ever dealt with school boards, good luck. There is so much relationship building, nuance, politics in the work we do in order to help children and teachers succeed. And it's our job to get over those politics, but it's really hard, as Jason said.
And just to add to that,
glacial.
And glacial. And this is a true fact, and you and some of the amazing operators in the room can back me up on this. There's like 1,000 great sales professionals in all the land in ed tech, and we have all cycled through them. And so when we talk about how hard it is to scale distribution, we're like, it's very serious. We have 150 sales professionals that work, and we have amazing sales professionals at Edmentum. What I think is interesting, though, that is a little bit of a transition, is more companies are working better together. So where you have, so in terms of how to think about differentiating your channel, we're all fighting it out with our direct channels, right? And as we think about like how do we call it co-opetition or, you know, thoughtful partnerships, where Edmentum is really, really strong on the digital curriculum side, and we've got great partners like Renaissance and NWA on the assessment side, and we see that as a great benefit to the student. And so I think, you know, for those operators in the room, I think we're starting to see a better trend in this area, and I think we should do more of that, where we can bring our strengths to the table so that we can really benefit kids and teachers. But going back to the initial comment, it is very hard to scale, and for those of you that are looking to or trying to figure out channel structure in the US, if you're selling at the district level, you have to have direct, and they have to be really good.
And as you think about this interrelationship between, you know, for distribution as a whole, channel, scale, relationship, and I think about it in the context of a solution set which is expanding and integrating. How do the salespeople handle that? As a salesperson, are they able to interface with multiple different sales points, you know, who may focus on different either assessment or curriculum specializations? Or, I mean, how have you each managed that? Since, you know, I think I'm certainly getting the appreciation that, you know, the salespeople are, you know, a scarce commodity.
Yep.
And so, you know, but there are a lot of different dimensions to what makes sort of the ideal person.
So we have tried a lot of different experiments in this. What we find is somebody who has come up through education and has been in a leadership position within K-12, we can develop to be a great sales professional. And so we would rather hire from the industry and develop those sales competencies, we think, because we mostly have generalists, which is you're selling across our full portfolio as a sales professional. And then we augment you with really great experts, researchers, we kind of pre-sales professionals from both a technical and an academic perspective that help you strengthen your expertise over time. And we found that to be the model most effective.
As an operator who's brought together 5 companies in the new Illuminate education, you can imagine the transition for my sales team where most of those 5 businesses were specialists in a single point of sale product, and now they're carrying a portfolio. So just like Jamie described, and the structure we put in place at McGraw-Hill with my friend Sean Ryan here in the front row, we built, the account executives own the relationship, because that relationship is critical. They own the relationship in the district, but they bring in, we have overlays to bring in the expertise, the research, the specialist, the Uber expert to help heighten the understanding of the product. Because without that, you can't consolidate. You can't get big. Because you can't, especially with the kinds of products these are, there is a complexity in the educational technology. It's not a transactional piece of software.
Jason?
I think what you're hearing, from both these examples is like most things in life, a little bit of self-awareness goes a long way. Like you have to know what it is that the product you're selling. I know, we're investors in Renaissance, which has a couple of products which have very sort of different buying cycles. We're investors in Discover Education in this market, which has a couple different products with very different buying cycles. There's everything from core curriculum to hyper supplemental in science to fairly coarse supplemental in reading to interim assessment, which is pretty darn technical. And knowing where you are in that curve and who the buyer is and how long it takes and what the capabilities of your salespeople are really is tricky. It's tricky. So I think before you put too much in the bag and try to cut down your costs and become hyper efficient, you gotta be aware you gotta be very, very aware of what you're trying to do.
So really interesting topic I want to hone in on there, because I think as people talk about consolidation, a lot of times what we think about is leverage, and how do I get more leverage out of the system? How do I put more things in sort of the toolkit in the bags? It's described a lot of different ways. Another thing that they tend to talk about in the thesis consolidation is cost savings. And so how do you think about cost savings and what is achievable and how to strike the right balance? Because this, from my perspective, and having been an observer, not an operator, I've seen cost cuts drive great efficiency and margin expansion, and I've seen cost cuts result in enormous value destruction. So anybody, Jason, do you want to comment on that? Because I know you guys have tackled this in a few different ways. Come on, you're the P guy. You can talk about cost cuts.
The private equity guy seems like calling that guy. So I think you have to be very nuanced in your analysis of cost synergies in this segment. Education software it has some distinctive characteristics from actual software, in that, one, you need to send a purchase order every year. You actually have to renew your business every year. You have to resell it every year. That stinks. It's way better to not have to do that, but you do have to do that, right? And so the notion that you think you'll be able to employ some form of auto-renewal concept and be able to get away with that and have maintain software-like renewal rates is a pipe dream. Now, the benefit to that is that generally the sales efficiency metrics are good enough, and actually very good, that you can still dedicate the right amount of resource to that and still have a perfectly reasonably profitable business, but it's not a free lunch. So to think that you can buy a company, just simply eliminate its sales force, drop their products in the bag, and be on their way is perhaps overly ambitious for a segment like this.
When you guys look at investments, do you underwrite cost savings?
Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I mean, the answer is always, it depends.
He's slippery.
It depends. It depends. I would say there are some deals which are entirely premised on buying a similar product, and because there's duplicative distribution, there's duplicative G&A, and combining them and enjoying an earnings bump. I would say the reality in this market is those are far fewer and far less value accretive than product tuck-ins, which tend not to have immediate cost synergies, aside for some sort of modest back-end G&A reductions, but can really drive revenue growth. You know, the one thing that we see in the world of technology, which I do believe does extend to education technology, is the premium paid for profitable growth from an enterprise value standpoint. And so, you know, I think what we're trying to do when we look at cost reductions is what can we underwrite to maximize our growth subject to a reasonable level of profitability? Because the data pretty strongly suggests, one, it's the healthiest thing for the company, and two, that's probably going to work out best for us over the course of 5, 6, 7 years.
So now you've gone somewhere really interesting, which is valuation.
Yep.
So let's talk for a moment about valuations and competitive dynamics. And I think this is something that, you know, each person here has seen from a variety of dimensions. Some people are of the point of view that valuations have continued to escalate, maybe even beyond what's reasonable for the opportunities in the space. Other folks take the point of view that the opportunities that are being opened up by all these dimensions, which are scale, opportunities for efficiency, expanded value proposition, and maybe even the blending of TAMs that were historically seen as discrete pockets of funding, actually reveals that these are, you know, high return investments, even when multiples are getting, you know, into kind of the mid-teens or higher. And so, Joy, maybe you can comment about it, because, you know, I think the kind of being in the seat of driving M&A and seeing a highly active and therefore competitive set, you know, across the U.S., the seat that you oversee. Yeah. How do you all think about valuation, and how forward-looking is your view on the opportunity?
Well, first of all, I have to say, coming from China, I see the valuation here is much more reasonable. Being honest, yeah. And I was checking some data like last month, starting from year 2016, like down the road, like 3 years, starting from year 2016 and up until end of year 2018. Actually, I think the valuation hasn't changed that much. So if we look at the multiples, like the EBITDA multiples, like keeps being like 8 to 12 times. And if we look at the revenue multiples, it's pretty much like around 2-ish. So it hasn't seen a big jump or big drop there. And for us, yeah, definitely price is very sensitive, but we are the strategic investors and buyers. So most of the time we're looking to the true value coming from the product itself. Usually a little bit different from the PE institutions. We try to see what we don't have and what we do want to have. And then we go to the market and do the deal sourcing. For example, for the STEAM STEM, for the language, for the content, for the cutting edge technologies. We've done, actually last year probably for TAO, we have done more acquisitions in US or outside of China than in China, which means really great things we can leverage internally, which will definitely help we to meet more of our customers' demand and their needs, and also price-wise, it's more acceptable from our side.
I see. Awesome. One last question. I think we're going to wrap up here in about 30 seconds. One of the things that are driving valuation that people point to is increasing amounts of leverage, and the availability of leverage in particular around technology-based or software businesses in K-12. They may have, in particular, if they're recurring revenue streams, or I think the way you described it, Jason, was predictably reoccurring, but not necessarily recurring. Do leverage and K-12 software mix? Is it a good thing? Does it just require balance, or what do you think long-term is the right approach for businesses that have the high growth potential that you have?
I think of course, it's just like Jason's answer, it depends. But I certainly see an environment where the interest is in growth more than profitability. Maybe I'm wrong. And I do think high retention rates are absolutely a huge factor in that. And school districts in the US sell to each other. So those high retention rates lead to those great testimonials that lead to the next sale. And if you talk to, and we all know it's very localized by state, and the account executive is going to work really hard to get that first account in that state, make them the most fabulous evangelist, and leverage that. So those kinds of abilities to show in your financials that you can grow, you can do it profitably, and you can break into a new state, I think are all variables that are really important in valuation.
I think the other part from a leverage perspective is, yes, the software as a service subscription products, the high margin, the recurring nature, that's one part. But as you look at the way the market's shifting, and especially at the district level, how important services is to support that retention rate, and how many of us as operators have made our services far more recurring than they historically were. And so as you think about that, as you look at the total business and some of the companies that you're looking at as an investor, I would just tell you to look more closely at the recurring nature of services and kind of how strategically companies are moving in that direction, whether it's virtual instructional services or how we're packaging professional learning in tandem with our subscription products. Because I think that warrants, as we look at some of the leverage and we think about those ratios, I think there's some interesting things that recent transactions have shown by way of having some level of respect for the fact that we're making services far more recurring than they were before, because we have to. We have to sell services into the district, and that has to be part of the total solution. And as much as we can make that recurring, all of us are kind of running in that direction.
There's so much teacher turnover.
Yeah.
Excellent.
So if you don't do that, and teachers are turning over at a very high rate these days, then you're going to lose that retention.
Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Well, four great
agree on
visionaries, each in their own right up here. Thank you for joining us today. And I'm sure if you have more questions, you can find them outside.